When I was in my 20s, I moved to New York City from out west. I fell in love with the city, but I missed being surrounded by trees and animals and birds. So I found myself escaping to nature whenever I could. Then I'd come back to New York and hang up my binoculars. Eventually, I tried taking my binoculars into Central Park and discovered there was this hidden piece of nature right in the middle of the city. This familiar place suddenly wasn't so familiar anymore. It was like I was stepping through a portal and finding a wild world in my own backyard.
It's unusual that you can locate the moment in the day when you do something that kind of changes your life, and I can. 15 years ago in March, I was at a lunch in Manhattan, not that many blocks from Central Park, and someone just said, apropos of nothing, oh, the warblers will be coming through Central Park soon. And I had no idea what warblers were, and I asked him. And he said they're neotropical migrants, which I didn't know what that meant either. And he finally said they're beautiful little birds who spend the winter in Central America or South America or the southern part of the country, and every year they fly through Central Park following these ancient migratory pathways. And almost mystically, I just knew I was going to go out and find them.
Oh my God. Holy frickin' Moses.
Hey Elise, it's 8:30 in the morning. I know you're on your way to the park to see the hooded, but there's a prothonotary at the tip of the point. So come and take a look. He's gorgeous. Okay, bye. Do you think this little bird realizes that he's like causing joy for all these primates standing around just kind of staring at him?
He just wants his food. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
More than 200 species of birds are seen every year in Central Park, roughly a quarter of all the bird species found in the United States and Canada. Toward the end of April and on into May, the park explodes with bird life. On a good spring morning, there can be more than 100 different species in the park.
Where are you? Oh, is that it? Fly catching right there? Yeah.
Got it.
The park hosts a community of several hundred birders. Most, like the birds themselves, are seasonal migrants, visiting only in the spring and fall. But some of them are the regulars, coming into the park throughout the year.
The bird is still here, flitting around as it always does. Yeah. That's the bird is right there. 6 days. 6 days that bird has been here. I know one of Lloyd's friends has made the comment when he comes to park, he said, I've never seen birds so cooperative. I mean, they just, whether it's because they're on migration, they're used to the people, they're the yellow-throated warbler
that yellow-throated warbler over there,
5 feet away.
If that bird is getting within 3 or 4 feet of you, if you went to see that on the breeding grounds, that bird would be 60 to 80 feet up high, and you would never get the views that you're getting. And that's the experience with a lot of birds that hit Central Park.
Birds get here, they may not have seen people for 3-4 days. They certainly never saw, right, and they are friendly. It's like they don't care about how many people are here.
you ever get tired of looking at a cardinal?
No. How could you? Honestly, how
I
could
get tired
you?
of looking at these guys, but no.
That's a whole different story. If you get tired of looking at the common birds, you might as well just pack it in. I mean, these birds are just gorgeous.
Bay-breasted warbler.
Boreal owl.
Gray catbird.
Hermit thrush.
Indigo bunting.
Wood duck. Is that the full name?
Do you remember the bird that first made you go?
Oh, God. No.
So there wasn't one
Yeah.
particular scarlet
I've
tanager moment?
always looked at birds, and so I can't say the first bird that has made me go, whoa. Especially because almost any bird can make me go, whoa. Oh, Baltimore Oriole. Adult male, Baltimore Oriole in the tree right there.
Ooh. Blackburnian. Gotta find the fucker. You can bleep that. There he is. And he is beautiful. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
It turns every morning into a treasure hunt, really. You never know what you're gonna find. My friends mock me for what I do in the spring because they know, I tell them, they know from experience. From April 15th until Memorial Day, they won't see me because I'm birding. Someplace up here. Because I do enjoy the song so much and am pretty ear dependent, that makes the spring sort of ideal for me because they're singing their guts out. Plus in spring, they're in their gorgeous spring plumage. But the main thing is just, you know, spring here in Central Park is so spectacular.
I had always wanted to have some kind of relationship with nature. I grew up loving the outdoors and feeling like there was something there for me if I could only figure out what, but I never could figure out what. Had a hard time figuring out what I was supposed to do with pretty scenery besides take a picture of it. Really was when I got involved with this woman, and her sister and brother-in-law are total birders. So I politely went out with them on a Saturday afternoon. Just park was mobbed. And went to Belvedere Castle, and they're looking at these little birds in the trees there, and we stepped behind the castle, and there in the undergrowth, this little bird, little brown bird, which I later realized was a veery, which is a beautiful little thrush, cinnamon-colored back. And I've been walking in Central Park pretty much daily for the previous 7 years, and I thought it was a place of pigeons and sparrows. And we proceeded on down into the Ramble, and it's like the trees were hung with ornaments. It was amazing. Seeing this familiar urban park filled with birds like that, and gaudy birds, bright yellows, greens, reds, blues, blacks, whites, was one of those rare times in an adult's life where the world suddenly seems more magical rather than less.
I got so sick and tired of my friends who are non-birders asking me, oh, what's with the birding thing? How come we're not seeing you in May? Blah, 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 blah. That I just wrote them down. I wrote down the 7 pleasures of birding so I could rattle them off and say, okay, this is why I do birding. These are the 7 pleasures. Number 1 is the beauty of the birds. Done. Number 2 is the joy of being in a natural setting. Number 3 would probably be the joy of scientific discovery. Number 4 is the joys of hunting without the bloodshed, because you've got to, you know, kind of stalk the bird very often to get it without killing the bird.
I can almost completely forget I'm in the city when I'm walking through Central Park, especially in the North Woods. You know, you feel really like you're in a wildlife refuge at times. I usually walk into an area and listen. I spend a lot of time listening. And I find peripheral vision is sometimes better than actually looking for something. But oftentimes you just see movement. I'll spot a little tiny bit of movement. Either the color will be slightly different than anything in the surrounding area, but I'll be looking up and something will catch my attention, and usually it's a bird.
Number 5 is the joy of puzzle solving. So it's a little bit of a game. Well, what am I seeing? You know, what am I looking for? Can I figure out what this is?
I love it when I just see a small portion of a bird and then you have to sort of piece it together. You watch, you wait. Maybe you never see the whole bird at one time. You only get little pieces here and there. You would think, like, listening to all these little bird songs and picking out, okay, I hear this, this, and this over here. You would think that you wouldn't be able to do that over helicopters and kids crying and people yelling and car alarms and construction noises. But you tune all of those out pretty quickly. Nice. Cool.
Number 6 is the joy of collecting. It's kind of like stamp collecting in that most birders keep lists. Every time you get a new bird, that's one word that you can add to the collection. So that's an American redstart. It sounded like there was a black and white that sang from over here. There's a red-eyed vireo singing over there.
I'd like to see it.
I know. I'm not sure it would like to be seen, though. That's the problem.
Star is one of the matriarchs, I think, of birding in Central Park. It's sort of like an oral tradition for musicians, like folk musicians. There are people who are mentors. Star is somebody who really loves to engage with people in addition to being obviously obsessed with birding. I mean, she's part of Central Park. There would be no denying that.
4 times a week, every spring and fall for almost 30 years, Star Sapphire has been leading bird walks in Central Park.
I'm just raising my rates. They have been $6. I'm going to have to raise them to $8. There you go. They've been $6 for almost 10 years. I make enough to sort of almost get by. I used to make what could be called a living, now far less so. But I love what I do. Okay, let's see who's right of center. Is this chestnut-sided warbler? Just moving right, just watch for small movement. It's a joy to watch the light go on in somebody's eyes when they see a bird and know what they're looking at.
Yes.
And they kind of get it.
Perfect.
I don't look forward to retiring. I am enormously lucky in that I absolutely love what I do every day that I do it. It doesn't mean that sometimes it's not tedious for moments or for hours, or the day when you have to come up with 38 birds and the birds are not cooperating and you end up with 37. It's work, but I could keep this up for, I think, for hundreds of years. Nobody gets the chance to find that out.
I just got stripes on head because it was sort of hidden. The other thing that flashed in my head was worm eating, but that's high. Because all I had were stripes, but I don't think it was.
Catherine is my friend. We became friends instantly when she came on one of my walks. She's a good birder, and she has great joy in birding, and she's got very sharp eyes.
I can't see it. I'm gonna hang back here. There it is, just popped up.
I think I'm gonna go back to nuthatch.
I think it's a nuthatch.
There, it's absolutely
Absolutely red-breasted nuthatch.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I just caught it like a bit of its head, and I was like, oh, I think it's a nuthatch. That was awesome. Let's find something else good.
Yeah, that was. I love this time of year when, you know, a surprise can happen at any second.
Yeah.
I take my binoculars pretty much everywhere. Female magnolia. I don't take them to school, but pretty much everywhere else my binoculars are with me. I had a dream just before spring migration started. I was standing in front of a tree, and like every single migrant in the world was in that tree, and I was so happy. That was one of the best dreams I've ever had. The main question people ask me is why birds? And I guess they're so alive and active and beautiful and varied. There's something down here. And makes you feel kind of protective, I guess, of the bird. And I don't want them scared. A male American red star. He's cute.
Number 7 is the best one. That's what I call the unicorn effect, because after you've been birding for even a little while, you become familiar with the birds just from seeing them in the book, in the field guide or whatever, but you've never seen them in real life. So they sort of take on this mythological status almost. You're very familiar with the bird, you know what it's supposed to look like, but you've never seen it. And then one day, there it is for real, live, and it's as if this unicorn came walking out of the forest.
It's almost like seeing a movie star on the sidewalk. You've seen their picture, you've heard all about them, you feel this artificial sense of intimacy, and then you realize that they actually exist in the physical world and you're sharing space with them, and that they really are there. That's what it was like every time I would see these birds. They really exist. There they are. So beautiful and strange.
Picture yourself a migrating bird. It's coming into dawn. You've made your 300, 400, 500-mile flight during the night. You're starting to see light in the eastern sky, and you want to start heading down to a place that you're going to spend the day. What they're looking for, what they've been looking for millions of years evolutionarily, is a woods to drop into. There are nights in which millions of birds, literally millions of birds, fly right over Manhattan. And as dawn breaks, a few thousand of them drop down to say it's time for me to eat right here.
So if the United States were all one big, wonderful forest, you would have these birds all scattered. But what happens when they are on the northeast coast? And here you have this urban mess of buildings and no green showing, and they'll see a little patch of green from way up there. That's Central Park, and they'll funnel in.
Scientists call it the Central Park effect.
It's well understood now that all the major cities, the biggest parks, are places that really do concentrate the migrants. And they don't concentrate there by accident. They concentrate there because they are choosing to land in that spot, because they see and know that that's going to produce what they need. Most of the birds we see as migrants are coming from the tropics, one part or the other of the tropics. The songbirds largely are coming from Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, from South America in some cases. The shorebirds have come all the way from Argentina. Here comes 9 o'clock at night moving across the country, and all that blue is birds migrating. This is a radar map that shows, it shows a storm, but the main thing is it's showing a continent full of birds passing overhead all night long, beginning around 9 p.m. So Central Park, located right, there's a huge corridor of birds right up in there because they're migrating along the coast, heading up on into the Canadian provinces to breed.
The goal of all these migrants, the whole reason they leave the tropics in the first place, is to breed and raise young where they can find an abundant food supply. And for a few months each year, the fields and forests and tundras of the United States and Canada provide an immensely rich diet of insects and other creatures.
Birds are great because there are lots and lots of kinds of them, but there aren't too many kinds of them. If there were as many kinds of birds as there are beetle, there wouldn't be bird watching because, people don't beetle watch because it's just hopeless. One cubic yard of dirt and, you've got probably as many species as you have in the entire United States of birds. So it's just the right size. There's always something sort of interesting to look for. And even when there's not, each bird is itself this microcosm of behavior, often inscrutable, mysterious. So even when there's nothing interesting going on in the macrocosmos, you've still got this towhee scratching around in the dirt doing its towhee thing, which is so dear and so unlike anything else.
There's a wonderful word that E.O. Wilson, the great biologist, uses, biophilia, that we have this innate love of the natural world. Love is almost the wrong word. We grew up inside of it, and so we need it around us to feel more like ourselves. Birding is just the great mediating activity between what's urban and what's wild, and what's earth and what's sky. And I love having both simultaneously.
Migration is really good for about 4 or maybe 5 weeks, where we have at least 60 species of birds a day, 15 to 23 warbler species per day. It's really marvelous. And then it peters out. At this point in migration, I'm really tired. At the end of every walk, I can barely get myself home, and I just kind of collapse into bed. Okay, I just need to regroup
for a second?
So I finished the birding season on June 2nd. And on June 7th, I have a bone scan and I have a CAT scan. And then 5 days later, I go to see my oncologist and talk about that. So I do a bunch of medical stuff every June. But I also do go birding. I'll go out to Jamaica Bay a few times and the coast a few times. But I will probably only bird maybe 8 times in June, as opposed to 5 to 6 days a week during the month of May.
By early June, nearly all the migrants have passed through the park and settled in their nesting grounds somewhere to the north. But for a couple dozen species, Central Park is their nesting ground.
Central Park is mainly known for its migrants, and it's a famous migration spot. But there are birds here year-round. In the summer months, the robins breed here, the cardinals breed here. A few years back, there was a great robin's nest that everybody knew about up by the Shakespeare Delacorte Theater, which was on the statue of Romeo and Juliet. The nest was right there on Juliet's chest with Romeo looking down at it.
Roger Tory Peterson predicted long ago, when people thought that birds were going to all go extinct. He said, no, birds are going to adapt. They'll adapt to cities. And they certainly have. Not all species. But red tails have magnificently adapted.
Central Park's most famous bird is a red-tailed hawk named Pale Male. He built his home on the ledge of a fancy Fifth Avenue apartment building right across the street from the park. During the breeding season, his fans gather below watching for activity in the nest. He's figured out how to use a building as a sort of artificial cliff, just as birds everywhere make use of the human world.
It's ironic that Central Park has provided my link to wilderness because it is an artificially created environment. This wasn't just a wild piece of New York that had been fenced off and allowed to remain wild. It's man-made entirely. The streams around us are turned off with the flick of a switch.
The water we see running here is coming out of a pipe just out of sight. And you can never see the origin of the pipe. It looks like a natural spring coming out of a little rock cave.
And once the exaltation of early birding wore off in me, I would think I'm in this little toy environment and I want to be out in wilderness. But wilderness itself is like that now. You know, the Florida Everglades are maintained by pumps and sluices that were built by the Army Corps of Engineers, who 100 years ago pretty much destroyed the Everglades.
Central Park, so much of it is planted. So much of it was brought in. So much of it was designed. And yet it looks very naturalistic.
Even though this is a landscaped environment and not a real woodland, it is a real, we're making it into a real woodland. And every single part of it is important. So the insects are important. The fungus is important for breaking down plant material and adding nutrients to the soil. We really are trying to get as many of those natural systems going that a real woodland would have.
The people who manage Central Park have to manage it for a whole lot of different things. They're not just managing it for birds. They're managing it for the use by millions of people on a daily basis, managing it for human safety, managing it for transportation. Managed landscapes are the norm at this point. Even some of our most wild national parks and wildlife refuges have management underway at them, adjusting water levels to mimic nature and so on. There is no land out there in the U.S. that we don't manage to some degree or another.
The truth is, human impact is part of the universe. And there may be a new kind of nature, the nature that lives in urban islands, that will reach its own dynamics, its own interactions that'll be different than nature in a bigger, wilder area. And it's a perfectly valid way for nature to exist.
The fact that birds are everywhere is fantastic, of course, but I remember when I started birding, and I couldn't believe that Central Park was so full of birds. I just thought I had discovered this unlimited resource, that the world was filled with birds. And then comes the discovery on the heels of that, that actually one of the reasons Central Park is so great for birds is because they don't really have that many other places to land. And I think the funny thing about bird watching is it can trick you into thinking that the natural world is doing great, because there are so many birds you can find almost anywhere you go. But they are bound up with a world, that, a natural world that in fact is really in tremendous peril.
Beginning in the late summer and carrying on through October, the park is once again filled with migrants. This time they are heading south, back to their wintering grounds.
There aren't that many spots as rich and vibrant and full of bugs as Central Park. Birds start to know the spots that they stopped in before that worked. And so Central Park serves as a place in which a bird remembers that it wants to get there to use it for a few days on the stopover. It's sort of like having a favorite motel that you stop in on because it's halfway down to the spot you spend the winter and you love this place.
Yes, purple finches. Thank you, Catherine. There were three. Oh, land, they did? I bird all year round because the birds of any area change through the seasons. That's one of the joys of it. Nice this is a ruby. I love the way it's munching the insects, though. Charming bird. Time has a different meaning for birders. You see the changes really from day to day and from week to week in the foliage, in the bird populations, and so on. Okay, I'm sitting for just 1 second. Time has a slightly different meaning for me now that I have terminal breast cancer. I have a great deal more enjoyment. It's heightened my joys in life. And I always loved what I did, but it's heightened even more because I know it's not only is it not going to last forever, it's not going to last all that much longer.
For years, at the end of a season, I would have pangs when I said, oh, is this the last black-throated blue warbler I'm going to see for this season or for this year? And now I do wonder if it's the last one.
I think Star would have been a very intense, obsessive birder no matter what. But given a potential end date to that, which we all have, but we just don't think about, the sort of fury with which you might try to see as much as possible is probably increased. I would guess that's true in Star's case.
This is my current notebook, and I've got maybe 50 of them going back through the years since I was a little kid. This happens to have started at the beginning of 2010. And I use a 4-letter code, and so I'm about to do today's list. Today is the 29th. Barn swallow. Ooh, we had that red-breasted nuthatch, which I didn't mark down here for New York City. And the fun part of doing a list, of course, is counting. $44. I'm so happy we got over 40. It's 224 plus 3 is 227. That's great. There's one more day in this month, and I had wanted to get to 230, and it's now possible. I've 1 to 2 notebooks a year. Going back heavily over the last 30 years, that's 60. I have about 80 notebooks, I think, altogether. My mother threw out the ones from when I was a child, or I would have more, I know. But this is really fun. When you're in the middle of a blizzard and you're just hunkered down with a cup of tea, this is kind of fun to go through. Remember what you've had. Remember what you've done in happier times.
In the early days, when I was actually missing work time to come out in the morning to go birding in Central Park, ending up basically ruining day after day. You know, torpedo a morning's work, the day's pretty much over, and yet morning is when you want to be out in Central Park. It did present a lot like an addiction. That sense of anxiousness, impatience, unease that can only be stilled by getting over to the park, getting the binoculars up and seeing the first warbler of the morning, sort of like the first cigarette of the morning. Absolutely.
I think that sense that when you're not birding, you're missing out on something, not just intellectually, but almost in a bodily way, as if you were part of the flock, you know, as if you need to be out there with these animals, speaks just to some deep human impulse, really.
Worm-eating warbler.
Yellow-throated warbler.
Ovenbird.
Northern shoveler.
Black-headed gull.
Black-polled warbler.
I mean, I think it's a slightly odd activity for the general public. People do laugh at you.
You can be what would be considered a normal person interested in fashion or whatever, which I'm not, and still be a birder. I mean, being a birder doesn't necessarily change who the rest of you is, but I do think it tends to make you more interested in like science and the environment in general, so I guess you could consider birders geeks. Except I don't like the term geek because it implies being not cool.
It was old ladies in tennis shoes was the idea of birders. And men, they would tell their wife they were going fishing. And they would carry a fishing rod, and they wouldn't admit that they weren't bird watching because it wasn't manly. So.
But fishing was okay.
Fishing was fine, yeah.
Tell me what you thought of birders before your first experience.
Birders?
Birders.
Yeah, I didn't want to be one. I thought it was embarrassing. I still think it's embarrassing a little bit. You know, you're basically defenseless when you're doing this. You've got your binoculars up. You're looking at something that nobody else is looking at, and everybody else is looking at you, and thinking, you know, what a dweeb. There's really no way to look cool. There's no way to look elegant. There's no way to look sort of removed from it all when you've got the binoculars up. You are basically betraying that you want something and you're going after it, and that's sort of the essence of uncoolness.
I get up about 4:45. I'll get into the park about 5:30, 5:45, and it's dark for another hour. I guess it's a way of realizing that I'm still alive, or that I am alive. Working with machines doesn't do that. I've got to go out and touch a tree once in a while. I've got to look at a bird. I've got to see a squirrel moving. There's something in me that requires that, and birding opens me to all of that. Central Park will give me a nature fix even if I'm sitting on a bus going across town on 86th Street. I'll look into the park through the bus window and see something. I'll see a bird, I'll see a squirrel, I see the green, or in winter, the white of the snow does something to feed my insides, my soul, if I had one. There's stuff going on that you never noticed before that you find fascinating or beautiful or awe-inspiring. Wow, yeah, I never saw that before. It really does belong there, and it really does have a life of its own.
Migrating is a risky time of these birds' life histories. It's a dangerous process. There's no doubt about it. Millions of birds die during this process. If 10 million Swainson's thrusters leave the north, heading back to, in that case, the Andes, only about 8 million of them will get to the Andes, and only about 5 million of them will make it back all the way to the breeding grounds again.
Basically, my work is in a machine shop, and so that makes it very easy for me to make feeders. The feeders in Central Park are only up during the winter, but hanging a jug full of seeds so that the birds who are wintering have a little extra food We're not making birds live that wouldn't have, maybe 1 or 2%. Really, the feeders are there for our entertainment. They're good for the birds in a little way, and they're good for the bird watchers in a big way.
Check it out. So we have American goldfinches, a lot of them. Wow, there's a bright one. Titmouse. White-breasted nuthatch. Pine siskin. It's a lot of pine siskins. It's really cool.
I don't see birds as cute little things. They're part of nature. If you've ever seen a robin rip a worm out of the ground and hammer the thing till it's dead and then chew on it, maybe break it in half and swallow it, you know, wild animals do what they do to survive. It's their economy, and they're not nice about it. If you're talking about serious birders, something little up here, they see nature as it is. You go out and you look at it. It has its own raw beauty.
As the cold weather sets in, a different kind of migration takes place. Birds that spend the rest of the year farther north come down to the relatively balmy climate and often unfrozen waters of Central Park.
A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that birds can't exist when it's cold out. So long as they can get food, a lot of birds can make a living here, and they don't care specifically how cold it gets.
So I'd love to get to 100 birds in the city. I love numbers. To 100 birds in the city by the end of January, and 150 by the end of February.
Ooh, gulls. Yay. Just for a minute, I want to see what's going on over here. Well, looking at birds really takes away sadness in a lot of us. If I'm, for instance, if I'm in pain or something, looking at birds takes you out of yourself into the real world. I'm such a minute, any one person is such a minute part of the world. But you go out and look at some of the rest of the natural world, and it puts things in perspective. It also just makes you forget about yourself, which is a good thing, you know, for a while.
Every December for the last 110 years, Central Park birders have been getting together for the annual Christmas bird count. It might seem like a hopeless task to count every last bird in the park, but if enough people do it for enough years, patterns do emerge.
You're part of a vast network of citizen scientists and volunteers who are out both enjoying birds, but doing something that's really important science. Ramble team this way. We're compiling this data, and out of this, we're now producing the Birds in Decline report that showed common birds in decline, not birds that are on the endangered species list, but common ones, eastern meadowlarks, bobwhite quail, and things like that.
A blue jay. Did you get the big flock of house sparrows?
Yeah.
What do you estimate from that?
118.
A tufted titmouse.
One titmouse.
One titmouse, one northern flicker.
Right.
One song sparrow.
That's a first.
We found that nearly a quarter of the species of birds have declined more than 50% in the last 40 years.
These are birds that we know and love and are used to seeing every day.
Yellow-bellied sapsucker.
Unless we reverse that trend, we're going to lose many of them during our lifetimes. And that report was made possible by the long-term monitoring and tracking that you do. And as we think about what our children and grandchildren will see, they're going to be looking back at our counts now, and hopefully they will be doing the same thing and maintaining this amazing, wonderful tradition.
Tufted titmouse, northeast.
17.
Northwest.
74.
This has been a big year for titmouse.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Rambo.
31.
Did anyone see the turkey today?
At the boathouse, in the lake room.
Mm-hmm.
He's back there by the tables.
The turkey was there.
There just appears to be a lot less birds now than there were even 5 or 6 years ago.
I'm birding the park 20-plus years, and I have seen an unbelievable decrease.
Certainly since the 40s and the 50s, there's been a decline. It's not just Central Park. It's true, certainly everywhere around here.
Just the overall general feeling is that the numbers are just way, way down. It's very disheartening.
I'm just going to look over here under the bridge for a minute. I'm alive, and I want to live my life while I'm here, and I want to experience as much as I can. I don't know how to not stop and look at birds, guys. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself. I take my chemotherapy in the morning with breakfast. Yeah, I have oatmeal, blueberries, and chemotherapy. Oh, I didn't tell you my most fabulous birding experience of the year and possibly of the decade. Last Sunday, I had a phone call from a birding buddy of mine in England, and I see something big fly at my fire escape, and I'm going, oh my God, it's gonna be a red-tailed hawk, until I saw it. It was an immature female northern goshawk. It's pretty uncommon, and to have one land on your fire escape, here I am screaming, long distance to England. Yeah, it's the second best bird I've ever had from my apartment in the 22 years I've been living there. The beauty, the sudden beauty where there wasn't a moment before, it was so thrilling. It's like magic when a bird just suddenly appears in front of you in a most unlikely place or time.
It must be spring.
Good morning.
We're seeing all of the birders who we never see at any other time of year. It's almost like as the warblers start making an appearance, the birders start making appearances as well.
Red-winged blackbird. Now I've seen one, my spring has officially begun.
I don't think of it as a hobby any more than I think of raising my children as a hobby. You're simply embedded in this deeply human activity. You know, if buffalo migrated through the park, I would go out and watch them. But birds are all that's left. Birds are all that's left of the wild world that we can see almost anywhere in the country. And so I think one of the reasons bird watching is so popular now is this awareness of how fleeting things are. Everyone's hungry, hungry, hungry to touch something and hold something that we feel slipping away.
So I don't know, I think some people are predisposed towards just liking birds. I like birds. I don't know why. I tried not to. I tried really hard to like not be a bird freak for a while.
And I mean, it's like fishing. You know, some people don't get fishing, like me. Fishing to me is an exercise in boredom. Whereas for other people, it's zen. So, you know, everybody's got their own thing.
It's the writer's life, really. It's any artist's life is failing, waiting around. Nothing will ever work again. All the interesting birds are gone. Nature's falling apart. And then suddenly you're seeing a prothonotary warbler. And all of that is forgotten. And there's this moment when the world's okay.
So it was great fun to have the first walk of the season. Just to see people again and to see the spring plants. And the fact that we've all made it through another winter is, it's great. It's a great joy. It's a great joy to be back.
There's all kinds of things going on in here. Happy spring, everybody.